Hello there all you absolutely magnificent people, and welcome back to another episode of An Ecologist Plays, where we talk about nature while playing games. My name is Will and we are back in Empires of the Undergrowth, and today we are carrying on with our mission, which is of course to play as the Formica Ereptors, and today we are trying to be the Queen of the Hill. Now, of course, as always, we're only allowed to use ant species that we have already encountered. So today, we're of course going to have our queen and our workers of the Formica Ereptors. We are going to finally have some wood ants as well. We're going to go for the rapid fire ones because, well, they are extremely useful. We technically have not yet encountered black ants. We're only allowed to use them after this mission, and we haven't encountered any other ants apart from the slavemaker ants. So we are going to have some Formica sanguinea as our melee ants. Of course, we are going to buff our queen here with Royal Decree and Second Wind. We're also going to buff our workers here with Efficient Brood, meaning that they also have increased movement speed and they're able to harvest more food from creatures, and they've got a faster job completion speed. So this is going to be a very nice one for our workers here. We're also going to have them as nimble because, well, they're not going to get into fights, and nimble will just help them avoid fights even more. With our wood ants here, with our rapid fires, we are going to go for high pressure and crippling, because those two I think will work quite well together. And with that, our colony is set up. So let us jump right in, shall we? And here we are. Our Formica Ereptor colony managed to establish a nice little colony up on the high shore. However, springtide is coming, and with it, two ant colonies lower down on the beach are becoming increasingly under threat due to the rising tides, and our Formica Ereptor colony is now of course in danger as the tide rises, and the other two colonies will increasingly try to move higher up on the shore.
Although the nests nearer the water have better access to the food washed up by the sea, this rufa colony need not starve. The plant life growing nearby is home to herds of grey aphids. As they feed on plant sap, these tiny insects excrete droplets of honeydew, which the wood ants find irresistible.
And that will be extremely important.
They need only protect the aphids from danger to receive a constant supply of sugary liquid. Doing so is not always simple, however. Hungry ladybird beetles know exactly where the aphids like to graze. They can strip an unguarded stem bare in a mere matter of minutes. The ants will need to keep a close watch over their flock.
So our colony is extremely dependent on aphids for their survival. So we are going to do our best to try and protect our herds. In essence, we are herders, and we are going to try to keep our herds alive. Alright, so here we are. Our workers are going to constantly go and collect honeydew from the aphids over here. They're not going to fight at all. They're just going to collect honeydew and run back to our colony. And then, of course, we are going to have some soldiers protecting them. And you know what? We are going to go for some ranged ants first. We are going to go for our wood ants. They're going to try and protect our aphids from the Aphidophagous species. The Aphidophagous meaning feeding on aphids, and, well, ladybirds are a good example of an Aphidophagous species. These aphids over here, these I believe are a type of root aphid, if I'm not mistaken. I don't think we can, no, we cannot check there, but that is a type of root aphid, and these aphids are what we call myrmecophilous, meaning ant loving. That's literally myrmeco referring to ant, philous, loving. So they've got a close relationship with ants, in other words. And this relationship between the ants and the aphids here is a very good example of mutualism. Mutualism, of course, being when two species have some kind of relationship and both benefit in the process. Now, of course, the aphids are protected against the Aphidophagous species, and the ants, of course, get a nice source of food in the form of honeydew. And honeydew, very nutrient rich, so it's a great source of energy for them, and it's a valuable resource for these wood ants over here.
A party of Formica fusca black ants are heading inland.
Here they come.
The rufa colony must defend their territory.
So now, of course, we are getting the interaction here between the Formica fuscas and the Formica rufas here. There we go. Okay, we've already defeated them. That is marvelous. And now we just have to, I think, get ready, because there will be some Formica rufas coming up as well from the colony down here. So here we go. These two colonies, they've got lots of food down on the lower lying regions here. Some fish that are stranded here. Nice source of food, like a lot of food for them. They technically have basically unlimited food. We, on the other hand, have to protect our herds if we are to try and survive. Oh, interestingly enough, our food stores are full. May as well just quickly level that up.
The rufa colony on the low ground are sending troops to clear a path for their queen. The high ground colony must keep them at bay.
And here we go. Here comes the Formica rufas from the lower lying areas. They are mortars. Okay, so yeah, our rapid fires did quite well there. We actually managed to kill an aphid over there as well. That's brilliant. And now it seems night is falling and these ants are all retreating back into their burrows. However, we cannot afford to not be collecting food, so we are just constantly gathering food here.
The lower ground colonies have relented their siege for now. Night approaches, and with it, it brings a host of nocturnal predators out onto the beach. The high ground ants could go underground to wait out the night, but they would have to leave their precious aphids unguarded. It is a difficult choice for this colony.
It is indeed.
Face the peril out in the open, or hide away and risk losing their only reliable source of food.
And we are not going to even risk it. We are going to protect. That's what we're going to do. We thankfully have a whole bunch of soldiers that are just standing around doing their thing here. 19 wood ants here and 19 wood ants over here protecting as well. So both herds of aphids are protected quite well, I must say. We are going to also now start using our food resources to get some slave-making ants plopped down as well, and they are going to also form part of the protection. Again, as mentioned before, our Formica Ereptors here basically have the ability to do horizontal gene transfer, where we're taking, in this case, the genetics of the slave-making ants and the wood ants, and we are incorporating it into our colony here, and actually have the ability to make different species of ants as part of our colony. Now, one problem we have are these big rove beetles over here. I always find it so fascinating, though, these rove beetles with their tiny little elytra over here, the wing covers. Now, beetles technically have got 4 wings. This is the first pair of wings, and over time, as beetles evolved, that first set of wings actually hardened and started forming these elytra, these wing covers. And then underneath, they actually have their membranous wings that they can fly with. And it really is much bigger than you can see here. The membranous wings, if they unfurl, it will actually extend like way past or almost past the body over there. It's massive compared to the tiny little wing covers here. But we don't see the membranous wings because it's all folded up underneath the covers over here. And it really is amazing the origami that has to take place just to get those membranous wings under the wing covers of the rove beetle over here, or the devil's coach horse beetle, which is a type of rove beetle. I absolutely love rove beetles. Finally, the past year I've been seeing them quite a lot in our yard. They are around our compost heap quite a lot, and it's always a lot of fun to see them. Of course, not as much fun if you're playing as an ant colony trying to survive, but you know what? This is fine. This is absolutely fine. We are going to do our best to... Oh, wow. They are really powerful. Yeah, it's dead. Can you believe that? Okay. Do not mess with the wood ants. Now, while our ants are just, scurrying about, let's quickly talk about the ways that ants normally would actually escape from floods. Because, well, we've got fire ants that will be coming up later. They, of course, can build rafts. But these guys, they're not able to really build rafts to escape floods. Instead, their first line of defense would actually be around the nest itself. If water were to rise, a lot of ants actually have like this little mound around the entrance. And the mounds around the entrance there very often are what we call hydrophobic. In other words, it repels water. And it also raises the little opening higher off the ground. So a little bit of water rushing past the colony actually doesn't seep into the colony. If water were to seep into the colony, there are so many tunnels underground that it drains water. It actually acts like stormwater drainage. And it prevents the important chambers, at least, from being flooded, which is very, very important. And then, in some cases, some species like the mangrove ants may actually block off the entrances. Some soldiers, at least, will block off the entrances and prevent water from actually going into the nest itself. That is quite amazing.
The fusca colony is sending a wave of warriors to clear a path
Fuscas
for
are coming.
their queen.
However, they are going to meet their match, I believe. It's just a horde of rufas and sanguinea ants. Yeah, there we go, just defending the path to our colony there. But in severe cases, like the tide actually rising above here, yeah, these colonies, the one over here, the rufas over here, and the fuscas over here, they technically are doomed. So yeah, this is not a great place for them to build. Our colony up here, well, it is in a great spot. It is high enough that it's above the spring high tide mark, so we can survive the flooding that is to come. Now we're now also going to make our first level 3 sanguinea ants. There we go, the first one and then the second one as well. And there we go.
More soldiers are emerging from the
rufas. I noticed the music change. I was like, yep, the rufas are also coming up. Really amazing, the music. It's so well done in this game, I must say. I absolutely love the music in this game. Let's be honest, I love this entire game, but the music also is just it really stands out. And nighttime again is setting. So the rufas and the fuscas, they're all back underground. Of course, we're defending our aphids. Our aphids are our lifeblood. We are almost wholly dependent on the honeydew we created by the aphids over here. Now, the honeydew are these little droplets that you can see forming on the backside of the aphids. It's basically excrement secreted by the aphids. Of course, the aphids are feeding on the sap in the phloem of the plants that they are feeding on, in this case these milkweed plants over here. And with the phloem there's a lot of sugar in there, and too much for the aphids to actually handle, and so they excrete a lot of the sugars in this sugary syrup. And well, the ants just happen to love that. And it's a nice little relationship here between the aphids and the ants, where the aphids get protection against the aphidophagous species like ladybirds, like larvae of hoverflies, like lacewing larvae as well. And in return, the ants get a nice nourishment, nice food for them to take back to their colony. And just to increase the rate at which we gather food, we now have a second worker chamber over here. The one group of workers collecting food by these aphids over here, and the other group collecting by these aphids over here. So now, while we're waiting to be attacked by the other colonies again, let's quickly have a look here, because these two ant species over here are all attacking this hermit crab. They don't seem to be attacking one another. Instead, no, they're not attacking one another at all. They are at peace. And you'll sometimes find this when food resources are unpredictable, like for example there being no food whatsoever on the beach, and then suddenly like a whole bunch of fish get washed up on the shore. That's a superabundance of food, but it is sporadic, it is unpredictable. In those cases you very often find that the ants, instead of focusing on excluding other ants from the area, they instead rather just scramble to get as much of the food as possible. So typical example of scramble competition. But if food is more predictable, and especially if it is in short supply, like the aphids over here, one would try to exclude the other ants from the area. And that's what we are doing. We are protecting our herds over here against predators, but also if these other ants here were to try and come and collect our aphids or steal food from our aphids, well, we would be protecting it against them. So that is interference, competition. Very often observed if the food resources are more predictable, but in shorter supply.
More soldiers are emerging from the rufa nest.
Yep, there we go. They're going to stand no chance against our massive sanguinea here, and our wood ants as well. The wood ants now also are being upgraded. They're also going to tier 2 and 3, so, you know, bigger ones. Now, one reason why we also are trying to have as many workers over here as possible is because that is what would happen in these cases. Good pioneer species like our Formica Ereptors here, which are great at colonizing new areas, well, they would have a lot of workers and a very high reproductive output. And that's exactly what we have. We've got lots and lots and lots and lots of workers, and that allows us to really dominate the landscape over here, because that allows us to get more food more quickly, allows us to field a larger army, and also replace any losses we suffer as a result of the competition with the other ants. I do believe we are under attack again. Yeah, there we go. They're going to just suffer, and there we go, the fuscas also. Shame. Okay, back to protecting the herd, thank you. And as can be seen here, all our slavemaker ants, all our Formica sanguinea are now in fact tier 3. And here we are once more under attack. And once more we have repelled the invaders. And I believe it is nighttime, or nighttime is coming again, so all the rufas and fuscas are underground again. We basically have survived 2 days. Now, as nighttime falls, let's quickly chat about the importance of ants in the landscape. Because first of all, they are very good at pest control. Yes, some species, like our aphid farming ants over here, can actually increase certain pests by protecting the aphids, but they also are very important in terms of controlling the numbers of things like caterpillars and so, because these ants over here will not just be feeding on aphids. Yes, our colony almost exclusively feed on the honeydew here, but most ant species will not just be feeding on that. Instead, they will be feeding on anything they can find in the area. Caterpillars, all kinds of plant-eating insects they also would be going for. And then, of course, their mounds. These mounds over here will increase overall the drainage in the area, because as water does rush into these tunnels, it filters through the tunnels. It actually rushes through it and it goes deeper underground. Instead of collecting in pools on the surface and potentially running off, it goes through these tunnels generally quite quickly. And then along with that, these mounds, very often, at least around it, is what we call a nutrient hotspot. Because as you can see here, the ants over here are constantly carrying food back to their colony. And of course, they are going to eat the food and they're going to digest it and they're going to poop out some waste products. And the waste they will decompose, and the nutrients in the waste will then enrich the soil around the nest here. Termites are very good at creating nutrient hotspots, but even these ants here, their mounds also will generally be a bit of a nutrient hotspot. So they change the chemistry of the soil, which is really amazing. For such a small animal, they are incredibly important in the role they play. Now, yes, of course, I did mention that these ants will be protecting the aphids over here, and the aphids can be a bit of a plant pest, but there have also been some studies that showed that the plants where aphids are present and are protected by Formica rufus in particular, they actually do better, because the ants are protecting the aphids here and the plants that the aphids are on, not just against aphidophagous things like the ladybirds over here that will be eating the aphids, but they also will be protecting the plant against things like deer and other large animals that want to be feeding on the plants, because if the plants get eaten by the deer, for example, then there's no food source for their honeydew producing aphids to feed on. So they will be protecting their plants against those herbivorous animals as well. And also the smaller animals, things like caterpillars, will also be kept away by the ants. Because again, if the caterpillars come and eat all the leaves over here, the plant will do poorly and the aphids won't get enough sap to actually drink, and they're going to suffer as a result, and by extension then, the ants will suffer as well. So it is in the ants' best interest to protect these plants at all costs, and as a result, yes, the plants are being drained of their sap slowly but surely and a little bit at a time by the aphids, but it could be worse. It could be a lot worse.
Last night's high tide was dangerously close to the low-ground nests. Today is their last chance to relocate. The low-ground colonies won't show any restraint. Their attacks will be desperately vicious. Fortunately for the high-ground colony, many aphids survived the night.
Yeah, we're very good.
Food will be pivotal for the upcoming battle.
We are very good at protecting our food resources. Look at these aphid stealing, well, not stealing, but they're trying to feed on our aphids, these black ants over here, the fuscas, and I wonder the rufas, I think they also were coming for aphids. They're trying to get some food because, well, they have run out of food now. All their food is currently underwater. So now they are becoming a little bit more aggressive, trying to get to our aphids, our food source over here. That is very interesting. I have never seen that because I've never played on hard difficulty or higher. So yeah, I've never seen them trying to get to our aphids. Let's just bottleneck them over here. They are going to be screwed. We've got so much food stored away. We really don't even need to gather any food and we'll still be fine. And here we go. Even some here. You know what? We are just going to come straight down to the colony here. We're just going to plug these colonies as they're trying to flee. We're just going to stop them dead in their tracks. You know what? There's a bunch of fuscas over here. We are going to eradicate them as well. We really are very, very good at excluding all the ants from our area. Yeah, there we go. Shame these poor ants. They are trying their best, but we just refuse to let them survive. And now even our workers over here are generally quite good. They're all tier 3, so they can gather food, although they can't gather food anymore because our food stores are full. They're just standing here protecting our aphids, and then if the time comes and we lose soldiers, well, they can be replaced and the food can be replenished immediately. Now, one thing that must be said is that the tide will not stay like this. In reality, what will happen is twice a day, the tide will rise and fall. So in a 24-hour cycle, twice the tide will rise and twice the tide will recede. But, you know, for game purposes, the tide is just rising systematically over the course of 3 days here. So technically what is happening, though, is that as we are approaching either full moon or new moon, that's when spring tide will be, the tide will rise higher every day. So in this case, what we are seeing here is actually the zenith, the top of the high tide. Okay, so the first day, it rose up to about here. The second day, it rose up to about here, and now it is over here. And with a full moon or the new moon, whatever the spring high tide is, it will rise up to about here. And our colony is just above that. Our colony is moderately safe. Yes, there'll be water underground though, so I'm not sure how safe we are. There will be a lot of chambers just below the surface here, but any chambers lower down, as the tide rises, the water table rises along with it, and the water will filter through the soil underground here, and may actually flood some of our chambers. So
the day is almost over. The low ground is already starting to flood. The lower ground nests are emptying completely, and the ants are rushing up the bank.
Oh, we've killed that queen.
This is their final assault.
Oh, both queens are dead. Shame. The assault is dead before it even started. Shame. Well, ladies, we have accomplished what we set out to do. Well done, everybody. And now soon the tide is just going to rise completely up to about here, I think. And there we go. The lower lying colonies completely flooded. Our colony quite fine. And so, as the lower lying colonies are swept away, the Formica Ereptors have established themselves as the dominant force here on the beach. Able to generate massive numbers of workers and soldiers, they have dominated the landscape. And as the tide recedes, they'll be able to feed on the bounty of the lower lying area. And from here, they'll be able to establish sister colonies all over the landscape. Well, everybody, that is it. So thank you very much for joining me on our little adventure over here with our Formica Ereptors. Next Tuesday, we'll be playing the first of the leafcutter missions as the Formica Ereptors. So tune in to see how that goes. And until next time, everybody, stay safe. I'll see you all soon. Cheers!